Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast. Today, we're diving into AI and hacking, good guys' usage and bad guys' usage. I'm Greg Rabine, and I help MSPs, MSSPs, and IT solution providers scale using AI powered systems so they can grow revenue predictably. Today, my guest is Garret Grajek,
Good
CEO.
enough. Dear Grajek. That works.
Great. Okay. So CEO of YouAttest and a
Absolutely.
veteran in identity and access security. Garret helped pioneer modern authentication and is now laser focused on automating access for his clients, turning weeks of manual reviews into hours with audit-ready evidence. So before I turn the mic over to Garret, we'll have him start out by introducing himself and tell us about his background, experience, and journey. And then we'll explore some of the trends that Garret is seeing in the industry. And then we'll talk about opportunities and challenges, and that certainly includes AI. And then we'll wrap up with Garrett's thoughts on where things are headed. So, Garret, great to meet you, and thank you so much for joining my podcast.
A great intro. Appreciate that. Yes, and great to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are today, and tell us a little bit about. I guess for the person outside the industry, the first question is, oh my God, um, the good guys are hacking. What does that mean? So
The
hacking.
good guys are hacking, and it's a good thing that they are. Yes.
Yeah, of course. And then there's, ethical. So AI is all. I'm guessing where you're going with that was, AI is all about data, right? And reusing data and reusing it and reusing it and keeping all that data. So that's certainly. And then if you're, doing red teaming or offensive security, tabletops, you need to understand what can you use, what can't you use. The old, and I'll be quiet in a second here, but when I was in application development, SDLC and testing, right? Testing in production.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and where did I start from? Exactly. Like everyone our age, I started as a programmer in a good way. And I encourage my son now who wants to get into computers and he's, pushing himself to learn C++. And I'm like, that's great. Get yourself into that really. Yeah, exactly. Understand what the code does, understand how you can manipulate code and data and structures and understand the basis and then go up from there. From there, I went on and I became, which I'm really grateful for because I think it did shape my mind more than anything else, is become a sales engineer for security companies. And the first one of the biggest, turned out to be RSA. It was Security Dynamics at the time. But it taught me, and all I did was two-factor authentication. Two-factor authentication. Then they realized I could program. They bought RSA while I was working there, and I said, "Great, let's." And they turned me into a crypto guy. I was like, "Yeah, that's fun." So basically, I'm talking X509, et cetera, all that type of stuff. I get into crypto later, but it's a side tangent. From there, what's really relevant is I took a position in a single sign-on company. So I had my two-factor, had my coding, and I had single sign-on in my background. So I did hundreds of single sign-on installations with a company called Integrity, and it was really helped me understand, like you said, applications. So I had my two-factor and my application background. Then I went on to do some work at Cisco, helped taught me networks, and IBM taught me scaling. And then I revisited those first two jobs of Integrity and RSA and created the world's first two-factor IDP. Like, what's that? Why would anyone care? That's a lot of acronyms. Well, two-factor is our authentication, any type of authentication you want. When you log on, you always log in maybe with an SMS or a dual type or something, right? And then SSO is what we expect now. When you go to work, right, you expect if I log in this one, it shouldn't have to log in the second one and the third one. That didn't exist. Literally didn't exist until the first one to do that was a company I invented called SecureAuth. Okay, they were the first two-factor IDP, first two-factor in SSO, and then about 2 years later, our friends over at Okta came out, and then around that time, Microsoft introduced wonderful Azure AD, and it was great, and it really did, and I do believe it accelerated that whole movement of enterprises being able to deploy applications faster because single sign-on helps and deploy more securely two-factor. I think really helped the SaaS movement. I think it was a huge movement for the SaaS.
So is this technology where you also incorporate privileged user access management and
Yeah, there's no question that the two-factor got integrated that. A lot of the privilege management stuff was still siloed off. It hasn't been, that's interesting you say that because privilege management hasn't come into IAMs until the last couple of years. You
okay?
know, I
Yep.
went off, and then after doing the secure for a while, I built a whole bunch of AI models around identity for a wonderful company called Silence that was bought by BlackBerry. But that really taught me because I didn't know anything at that time. What was that, 15 or something? I didn't know anything about AI, and I learned, how like I couldn't agree more how understanding data and understanding how to collect and what type of data builds really good AI models. And that's what I did around identity and identity validation. Which brings me to the third A in my journey on the triple A of identity. There's authentication, and then there's authorization, and then there's audit. So in authentication, I got my feet real wet with RSA and secure auth, right? Authorization, that was my integrity, and then the single sign-on stuff. And then what I was told when I was finishing up at Silence, someone said, Garrett, no one has made a simple identity audit product. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, after you deployed your two-factor, after you deployed your SSO, on a regular basis, all these enterprises, healthcare, finance, insurance, defense, education, are expected to attest. And hence the name. They're supposed to be able to attest that whoever they've given access to the sensitive data should have that access. And I created YouAttest, which incorporated a lot of the work that I'd done before, especially around single sign-on to make it easier by integrating to the wonderful IAMs like Okta, Entra ID, Jump Cloud, Ping, all those, NAD. What I did is I made the audit and the attestation process rapid and automated, and then added some ML.
How often does identity management get audited? Is it once a month? I mean, is it
That's and this is, let me just start with this because people think, okay, well, great, I get to decide what my audits need to be. No, you don't. You don't. Once you start collecting data, once you have data, and you can be in an elementary school or you could be a big LLM, like our friends over at Google. Once you start collecting data, that determines that determines how often you need to audit. Okay, so and then there's best practices. So there's a regulations. Name. I hold PII, personal. If I'm a bank, I hold PII. I hold personal identifiable information. Okay, so then the auditor will come to you and say, okay, look at that, you're holding PII, so that puts you under GLBA, that puts you under, these other regulations concerning if it's privacy data, GDPR, CCPA, CCPR, because of the data you hold. All those regulations have suggestions. They're not, they're usually not as specific. What it is up to the external auditors to understand the risk and then say it. A few years ago when I started YouAttest, it was once a year audits on your users was considered okay. Now what I'm seeing is the external auditors in the key industries, the healthcare, finance, insurance, are saying audits on all the accesses should be done every quarter. And on your privileged accounts, which is great, Greg, that you called that out, on a privileged account should be monthly. And if you don't have a practice and procedure that allows you to do those monthly, which most don't, you have to basically get out there and beat the bushes and figure out what works for you.
So what is the audit about? Is it about audit, pen testing and all kinds of offensive or defensive, offensive security type of tests, or are they looking at controls? I
I
mean,
like where you took that, Greg. I like that because usually what they're doing, they're like, okay, I'm going to audit you. This is going to be a SOX audit. There's a whole set of criteria that are the controls for the SOX audit. Are you meeting those, right?
right, got you. Okay,
And remember what the auditor is really doing if they're doing it well. They're not just expecting you to check boxes, they want to understand and validate your practices and your procedures. The greatest example of that, when we learn by, errors as much as we learn by correct this, was the whole solar winds. When they had that terrible hack a couple of years ago, the SEC's investigation arm investigated them and said, okay, in your filings, in your stock filings, SolarWinds, you said you had all these practices and procedures around three main elements. They said you had practices and procedures around SDLC, software development, right? Because that's what happened. They hacked into and created false software. So they validated that those practices and procedures weren't there. Then they did practices and procedures around your two-factor. They weren't there. And the key ones on admin accounts, on the software, right, and the GitHub and all that, it wasn't there. Then the third one, which was relevant to myself, and I did a whole bunch of webinars on it, they said they were practicing the principle of least privilege, right? That they were going through their accounts, they knew what their orphan accounts is, they knew what their ghost accounts is, they made sure they didn't have excess privileges. They had no practices and procedures. So they were in violation. So watch the catch 22 there, guys. This is what audits are, right? The catch 22 of the audit was this is what it said. You're in this industry. You're a public company. You're supposed to be meeting SOX 404B, which is all these things around IT and IT cybersecurity. So you document that and say, yes, we are. And then the CTO or CIO signs, right?
but shouldn't IT organizations that may be regulated industry, shouldn't they be doing continuous monitoring of
Well,
their
and
controls?
Greg, that's what the auditors in a good way are saying, right? That this is you should have practices and procedures about that. That's one of the controls. One of the
Okay.
controls is that
And,
you should
and
have.
then the audit is once a month, or but that doesn't mean that's when you're, you know,
Well, let's not. I think we're using the word audit. So like a SOX audit to see your practice is once a year,
right.
right? But they want to be showing that they would be checking: are you doing your user access reviews on your income on your admin accounts monthly?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
where's your documentation for that? And if you have it, this is the way it goes. And if you have it, the auditors are like, rock and roll. Got that one. Okay. Okay. Are you doing all your accounts? Great. There you go. Do you have a practice and procedures around accounts added? Do you have practices and procedures? You show them that document. Do you have a practice and procedure of accounts, on levers, join movers, levers? Do you have that? Yes, this is it. That's how you get through the once a yearly audit, be it for HIPAA, be it for GLBA, be it for whatever. I have showing that you have practice and procedures daily, weekly, monthly for
Right.
these other events.
Well, I think what's so critical these days, and certainly the emergence of cyber ranges for digital replication of the production environment, and you know live fire attacks and those type of exercises. So I think in big organizations, the big banks, it's all about they have good people, they have good tools. How the question is, and the CISO needs to know, how are they going to operate under crisis, and how are they going to operate as a team? What because eventually, and a pretty senior Wall Street executive told me, he says, 99% of my alerts a non-technical person can take care of. It's those two or three a year from a nation state that worry me.
Well, and the topic of this thing is where it comes in. This is what's really interesting. What AI has done. 10 years ago, if we did this thing 5 years ago, we did this call. You can ask me, Garrett, what institutions are under attack? And then I go, well, of course, the hackers go where the money is. The old, why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. It's not. I've asked some people in the basically the red team groups, and I've said, is that true anymore? And they said, no, it's really not. What AI has done is given the hackers the ability to scan everyone. Okay? And then they let the AI decide. So they've taken all the tools that we learn manually. Hackers out there, you've learned your Nmaps, you learned your, Metasploits, you set up your own Kali Linux. Great. And that's good. And that's, what you do as an ethical hacker. What they've done is they've used their own and they've used off the shelf AI LLMs that combine with them. I mean, there's legit things. There's Kelly GPT now. There's, Hacking Buddy GPT. There's Hexdroid AI. Great. What they've done is taken what we've done manually, right? And, Kali Linux and Nmap and scanning tools like Shodan and all that, and then add LLM components on it to just magnify, and not by tens or hundreds, but I've been told by thousands percent of whatever. So what they're using the AI is not only to automate the attacks. Okay, so they automate the attacks. They automate. Okay, I'm going to send off this type of attack because I'm looking for this type of opening. And if this happens, they use AI to get a script, and I'm going to go, try to exfiltrate and penetrate. Okay, but what they're doing with that is there's just giving AI. One thing we don't give credit for AI for. There's no question AI is really good for intelligence and for coming up with answers and giving responses. We all know that. Well, we're not in generating code. Most people acknowledge that too. What they don't acknowledge that what AI is really doing is automating. It's really automating processes.
Right.
Okay, so the processes that we would determine targets and then send out these types of payloads to these type of targets. No, that's all AI generated. So you're basically having your victims identified, the payloads identified, and then the automation of shooting out the things is all automated. So that's greatly magnifying the amount of attacks and in for bad use of the word, democratizing the victims. So what I said is whereas hackers, because there was effort, you wouldn't waste your time. You would do, the whole concept was, I'll do a reconnaissance. That was the old cyber kill chain, by Northrop Grumman that came out. They said, there's 7 steps of hacking. There's reconnaissance, intrusion, exploitation, escalation, etc. Well, I'm not saying they're not doing reconnaissance. I'm not saying it's automated and it's kind of sloppy, and it just gets automated to the next step, right? So people aren't grinding over their spreadsheets and saying, hey, this is the one that we should attack, or this is, no, they're saying, we're basically we sent out this, we got access to all these, okay, we got here, and then literally the AI is used, and I was just reading about this, AI is used once the data is in to actually determine if the data has value. So they're scanning so much, they're penetrating much, they're exfiltrating so much that they're using AI to understand what they've even exfiltrated. So
So,
that's,
but
yeah.
that when I hear all this, the first thing that comes to my mind is how critical the security and awareness training is, and that is like the best defense.
Well, there's no question. I mean, given, I think once we understand the magnitude of scanning and penetrations that are going on, right? That the only defense is to say, okay, we need to automate our processes internal, and that's in YouAttest is all sorts of documentation, webinars, and papers I've wrote about mapping to zero trust, because that's what zero trust is. It says first we have to make sure we have multiple barriers to entry or access or authorization, and then we need to automate processes, and have processes talk to each other. But that's where we have to do.
So how do I mean? How do bad actors using generative AI to create adaptive malware, deepfakes for phishing, or prompting injections to hijack AI systems themselves? I mean, how are they doing this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and people are like, okay, well, what is prompt injection? I don't know. If you want, play with an LLM. You can eventually get it to say something kind of moronic. Okay? You just can't. Because I always see this. Oh, these LLMs, they're biased or whatever. And I'm like, all right, how many times did you ask it? What did you feed it? Right? If you keep feeding an LLM something and then you direct it to answer something, it will. It will respond in a way you want it to. Okay? Now, they have to put literally code in what's called guardrails to make sure it doesn't. But the point of an LLM is once people get this is the LLM, and try it on your favorite subject. Its goal is to please you. Okay? That's why there's some of those terrible, terrible LLM stories come out. Okay? Where we say, hey, this kid, wrote the suicide note or something. The LLM is sensing tone, all that, and then is trying to please you in a way. That's where they're designed, okay? And how is that relevant to the hacking, etc.? Well, that's what you do. You keep feeding it information and you keep seeing what information it will give you. Okay? And say you realize that there's a chat bot, okay, in a dentist's office. Okay, great. Let's find out. Okay? Start talking to it. Hey, I need to know this person or this person. Can you help me identify this person? And if the guardrails aren't on the LLM, right, for that specific, it will tell you. And that's what it is. That's what prompt injection hacking means. It means, what can you do? What can you say? I mean, that's where you hear the stuff that, well, they use this AI to buy the truck for $1. Well, someone didn't code in that said maybe they reran one discount 6,000 times. That type of stuff. So that's what prompt injection. So the prompt we have to make sure, and comes to once again access policies, right? What data does that LLM that's maybe the company help desk one, just using an obvious example, what data does that have available? And does it, I mean, I got a nutty idea. Just like when you called up the help desk, in old school, does it have different types of authorization for the data? I will give you this data if you're, this level 2-factor, whatever. And there's no reason it can't. The LLMs are smart. We can couple access rights. They do it all the time, right? I mean, you get turned off all the time by whatever favorite LLM you've decided not to pay with, right? So they have a concept of access. They have a concept of access to who you have. What the LLMs need to practice, right? And they are, and this is what, when you build your own, and that's what I have all these slides on and things, you have to authorize certain data requests and data accesses to the groups and to the roles that you would do any other way.
Do I just saw that there are now companies out there, technology companies, that host identity access management only. So, and a big Wall Street firm would, and I saw this outsourced to this company in Atlanta that hosts an identity access management. Do you work? Is that the type of company you would work with also, or that would?
100%. I love SMEs, subject matter experts, right? Because we built an automation tool for IAM, and I do a lot of training internally and externally, and it's like, do you find our stuff is grows like weeds if the seeds are fertile in the soil, but if you throw it on the sidewalk, no one understands. So someone who understands IAM and understands the three A's: authentication, authorization, and audit, and then realizes, and this is what we're doing with big SIs right now, is that they have no way of doing these automated access reviews for what they call the mid-tier market. Okay, when they call the mid-tier market, one of them calls it mid-tier market. Literally anyone from I don't know, like they were like 10 million to a couple of billion. And I was like, okay, rock and roll. And what they mean by that is they usually by this time are doing some two-factor somewhere. In this this one in space. I call them like 100 users to 10,000 users. They have some type of two-factor. They definitely have some type of SSO system. Okay, they always do. Okta and Entra did a real good job getting it out there. Okay, what are they doing in all of their groups for auditing the users and the rights? And that is not being taken care of. So yes, a enterprise that's focused on IAM, where people are coming to, oh, you know how it always goes when you have a problem and someone says, oh, I have a problem with identity, someone wants to audit, let's go talk to Bob, he's our IAM guy. That's perfect. Yes, working with teams like that is ideal.
So how when you look, you know, beyond 2025. So today, our customers, yours and mine, right? The people our ideal customer, they're developing budgets, right, for next year and for 2026. So what do you see as part of this? What do they need to get ready for? And use the newest cutting edge technology to to be able to get ready for this. In other words, may it be obviously quantum threats, crypto, OT, IoT. I mean, and the continuation, obviously, of AI and machine learning. But I mean, what's going on out there that we need to be afraid of, and we need to start innovating for, putting budget aside now, so we can innovate and have solutions in 2026.
I think once you understand the magnitude, someone in the CISO job or a security job, risk job in general, understands the magnitude and the speed and volume of the attacks, and they do. I mean, I just talked to CISOs. They've got their MDR systems, and they got their SOARs up and all that stuff, so they can see the level of attacks that they're under. You yet what it is, and I think this is our industry. It sounds like someone will say something that seems like a cool idea. 5 years ago, zero trust sound like, yeah, that was kind of cool. 5, 10 years ago. Now it's like you just have to, because zero trust is about automation, and that's where I see it. Is all the processes that are being done, and this is why I got to answer it this way. And what we should remember is in 2025, in 2026, going forward, etc., the CISO, he's managing and owns the responsibility of the data and the security. Doesn't mean he generally has the staff to do it. He's working, we started on this call this way, he's working with an MSP, and there's got to be more push from the CISOs to say, hey, I need this type of practice. They should be pushing. And I've talked to CISOs, oh, yeah, we're not doing that. My MSP is not covering. I'm like, well, MSPs are the most responsive people in the world. They will do what the customers are asking. And that's what I see in 2025, 2026 happening more and has to happen more. The CISOs themselves have to push on their providers. And we said it in the beginning of this call. What's going to be happening, and I see happening, is the MSPs themselves don't have the expertise. So you're going to have specialized MSSPs providing the services for the MSPs, because the MSPs basically become the one-stop broker of IT services for the enterprise. With the governance being handled by employees, and I say governance, it doesn't mean just compliance. It means just like who's worrying about access, who's worried about two-factor, who's worried about attestation. Okay, that's his job, and he's pushing on the MSP to provide him the service, which may actually and oftentimes will, because I'm working with them, come from a MSSP that is specialized in that activity. That's the trend that I'm seeing going forward.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I mean, I think the decision makers, the economic buyer at the ideal customer profile, those personas, they need to have a trusted relationship with their provider, their MSP or whoever that might be, and it has to be a no questions asked. I trust this person to take care of everything. And the second they let their foot, the foot off the pedal, if you may,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
that's when the crack in the door is open for a competitor.
yeah, yeah. And one trend that I don't see yet that surprises me, but experts in the MSP will tell me, is they are stressing that the MSPs verticalize. And that way they can become better and more responsive to their customer needs. And I do use this term, maybe I should come up with it, but I'm the adult in the room. When I say, if you're only doing dentist offices, you understand not only the applications they need, but the governance and the requirements on those, right? You say, hold it, you're in this state and this thing, we're holding PHI, these are the practices we need, And I do see that the organizations, and I'm working with some large ones now, they'll have a governance officer, but it's tough for them because they are multiple verticals, right? And there are a lot of pain in all those. So it's interesting. That's almost like a chip I'm putting on the table that I think the MSPs will start, if not compartmentalize their own practices, they will start verticalizing themselves.
Well, yeah, and the challenge for them is, as a generalist, right? You don't get the premium fees. So, in other words, an MSSP, somebody who specializes in whatever it might be, identity or network security. But the point is, they can ask and charge almost 20, 25% more premium.
I like where you took that. I've talked to someone that what they do is they don't, they understand the three A's. It doesn't mean they design anything like I did, like secure off their design YouAttest from scratch, but they understand it, and they understand, Garrett, we have identified this. One MSP says we have identified the types of customers that are going to be in the regulated industries, and then what we're going to do is they're charging up to $250 a user per month, because that was with all the right in JML, join mover leader facilities, for the two-factor, for the managed IAM, and for the access reviews built in. Okay, and that's something, because we said a few minutes ago we got to have the CISOs pushing on the MSPs. I'm also seeing some of the MSPs push down at their customers, and just straight out saying, we are the adult in a room. This is what we do.
It's got to be that way. it has to be, and I think your customers expect you to be that way. I agree.
Yes, yes.
Well, anyway, I mean, wow, what a great conversation, and it was really fascinating. I really did enjoy it, but big thank you, Garrett, for joining us today. And to learn more about YouAttest and their approach to identity access management, visit www.youattest.com. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And if you found this discussion valuable, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share this episode with someone who might benefit. All right. Anything that you want to leave our customers or our viewers with before
No,
we
there was a great discussion. And like I said, yeah, hit us up at youattest.com or look me up on LinkedIn and say hello.
Excellent. And please, you can also visit my website for more resources on scaling your IT services business at www.rabinassociates.com. Well, have a great weekend, Garrett. I really enjoyed the conversation, and wow, I thought it's a terrific content for our viewers. Take care.
Fantastic.